Hello, I'm Chuck Wolf, Chief Executive for Charles J. Wolf Associates, LLC. As a motivational speaker and a leadership consultant, and executive coach and trainer, I often work with very successful people in their companies. Since many can't afford a professional, I volunteer to host a radio talk show called The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel, on a nonprofit community radio station in Bridgeport, Connecticut, WPKN. My reason for doing the show is to share with as many people as possible this wonderful process for helping people manage their own emotions and their relationships with others. My goal is for everyone listening to learn to use the Emotion Roadmap to make life better. As you listen to me, help others, I hope you are also learning. As a Simsbury resident, I'm delighted to be able to make the show available through Simsbury TV. To learn more, go to my website, www.emotionroadmap.com. Thank you for listening and watching.
And this is Chuck Wolf. You're listening to the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. It's nice to be here with you, and it's a lovely sunny day in Bridgeport, Connecticut, but there's some troubling things happening in our world, as many of you already know. But before I start on my show, I would like to encourage everybody to take some time and think about how you might contribute to WPKN. We have people standing by on to answer the phones, and I'm just going to say this once, but I hope that you enjoy the community strip, and I hope that you really like the aspect of all the talk shows that we have on the air from 12 noon to 1 p.m. And I hope you like the Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. It's a show that's dedicated to providing you with the kind of insights you need to help your life to be more in balance, for you to be more in control of your emotions. And just to feel like you have the capability and the confidence to take on what you need to take on in order to make the world a better place. And I think that I want to talk a little bit about that today. But if you are a regular listener of this show, of WPKN, and you want to make a contribution, please give our phone call. Give a phone call to 203-384-9756. 203-384-9756. That's all I'm going to say about it. There's lots of premiums. You can call and talk to the people about the premiums. But I want to take my show today and talk about some challenges and tell you a little bit about the show. And for those of you that are regular listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. For those of you that are new listeners and you're wondering about the show, again, it's called The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel. I'm Chuck Wolf. I'm the host and the creator of the show, and I talk a lot about how emotions impact our lives and how we sometimes have very challenging situations where emotions are running out of control, and how do we get control back. And I'm convinced, as you will hear if you're a regular listener, you already know this, but if you're a new listener, that we have much more control than any of us might believe over how we respond emotionally to different events. So think about that for a moment. We have much more control than most of you believe in terms of our own feelings and our ability to influence the feelings of others. Now, some people are brilliant already at controlling their own emotions and influencing others. Others not so much. But everybody can learn to be better. And one of the ways you learn that is, if you're listening to this show, is through this Emotion Roadmap. And the Emotion Roadmap is a tool, a device, a template, a problem-solving methodology to deal with emotional challenging situations. And the idea behind it is based on actual new science that has emerged in the last 25 years or so, which helps us to understand that we each have emotional abilities. We have emotional abilities to identify how each of you individually is feeling, as well as to identify how others are feeling. We have emotional abilities to use emotions proactively, intelligently. We understand now, from understanding the science, that certain emotions cause us to behave and think in certain ways. other emotions cause us to behave and think in different ways. And if we are being smart about the use of emotions, we think about now, what emotion do we want to feel based on what we're trying to achieve? Now, that's not a simple idea. We think about how we want to feel based on what we're trying to achieve, because if we know that certain emotions cause us to react, to behave, to think in certain ways, and the behaviors and thoughts and reactions of the emotions we might be feeling at a point in time are not helpful to our current situation, how do we then change them? That's the understanding part of emotional intelligence. We also have the ability to understand how emotions work. Again, the idea of abilities means that some of us are really, really talented in certain of these areas, and others not so much, and most of us somewhere in the middle. So I said we have the ability to identify emotions. We have the ability to be really thoughtful to use emotions, to try and pick the right emotions for what we're trying to achieve, which may be different than the emotions we're currently experiencing for ourselves or for others. And to understand how emotions work. So if what we're feeling isn't helpful and we want to feel something different, more ideal, how do we actually get there? How does that happen? What do we need to do to make that happen? And then once we start considering scenarios for creating the new change in ourselves and in others, in terms of the change in emotion that we want to create in ourselves and what we want to create in others, how do we do that? And once we start considering different scenarios, different strategies or tactics, then in the managing of emotions, which is the next part of the emotion roadmap, there are two parts to managing emotions. One is the ability to manage our own emotions and the ability to influence and help manage another person's emotions or other people's emotions. How do we do that? Well, in terms of a specific situation, if you want to call in and talk to me about something on your mind that you want to deal with, and there are certain topics I usually like to talk about in the beginning to kind of frame what I want to do in the show, and I'll do that in a moment. But the idea is that you first think about identifying how you're feeling, if it's not how you want to feel, and you can think of what you want to feel that's better and more ideal, and then you're trying to think about how do I get myself from feeling, let's say, anxious to confident, or upset to calm. What are some things that you might do? And so I encourage you to think about the idea that you have more control over your own emotions, no matter what ability level you're starting with, by simply using this process to think about what are you feeling right now, about whatever situation is causing you to be upset, uncertain, doubtful. And is it a feeling that you believe is helpful to your current situation? I mean, if you're angry because an injustice has happened, then anger is an appropriate feeling. If you're sad because you've experienced a loss, then sad's an appropriate feeling. But let's say you've felt sad because you experienced the loss of a loved one, but it's been over 2 years. And while you're not as sad maybe as you were initially, you haven't got over this sadness, and it's still holding you back from moving on with your life. So at some point, sadness appropriate for a loss lingers too long and is no longer appropriate. So the question becomes, how do you move from a feeling that you're experiencing that isn't no longer helpful or isn't helpful at all anyway, to something that is really helpful and actually ideal? And then what do you do to get there? And you think about these possible ways that emotions work and how you might respond and whether you have a strategy that might work for you. And then in the managing part, I ask you to think about of the strategies you're considering to move you from sadness to calm to happy even. To move from anxious to confident. From angry to satisfied. Whatever it is you're trying to do. When you consider the different scenarios for getting you there, I then ask you to say to yourself, okay, of all the choices and the possible ways I might move myself from one feeling to another, which do I really believe I'm capable of doing? Do I have the capacity? Do I have the competency to actually move myself from whatever the feeling is that's not satisfactory to a feeling that's much better, more ideal. And whatever that is, whatever that scenario is, am I first able? And if I'm able, the next question, just as important and very different, is, are you really willing? Because sometimes we know we're capable, but there's something about the scenario that just doesn't feel like we're really willing to do it. But when you can say that I'm capable and I'm willing, you've got a real possible solution that's worth figuring out how to get started and how to get moving on changing your feelings. And probably you're going to have some success with that one. So the keys are thinking about challenging situations that we all might face or you're facing right now and how to deal with it. So let me bring one up. By the way, again, I want to just mention the show. It's the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. My name is Chuck. I'm Chuck Wolf. I'm the creator of the show. I'm considered an expert in the world of emotional intelligence, and I provide on WPKN the expertise to share with all of you. So if you're a regular listener, I'm on 12 to 1 p.m., the noontime strip, on the first 2 Wednesdays of every month. So if you want to listen and be a regular listener, you too can learn how to use this emotion roadmap to make life better for you and for those you care about and for all those you interact with. Because the smarter we all are in managing our emotions, the better life is. So let's see if I can get your help around something that's a concern to me. My show is not a political show. It's a show about emotions, but emotions are running. The people are running scared this morning with the shooting. If you haven't heard about it, there was a shooting of the majority whip, a Republican, on a baseball field where they were practicing for a bipartisan congressional baseball game that was raise money for different charities, and that was scheduled for tomorrow. And someone was shot today, Steve Scalise, the majority whip, and apparently he was shot purposely, from what I understand, because he was Republican. And you can find out more about the news, but I don't want to talk about the event so much as what I'm interested in is the feelings that have been in play since the election have been somewhat overwhelming, I believe, for a lot of people. It's interesting in the science of emotional intelligence. Usually, something that's upsetting has a run. It runs and it goes from mildly upset to extremely upset, and then at some point it tails off. It just kind of dissipates because we can't seem to have energy for high emotions for continuous periods. And if we do, we tend to experience breakdowns. And I think that's happening to a lot of people today in our country. So one thought I had is, again, I don't want the show to be about this alone. I'm going to introduce another topic too. But if you've got some thoughts about how to get people to feel less upset, I'm interested in hearing them. I'm not radical thoughts. I'm not interested in, let's impeach this president. That's not the kind of conversation I'm looking for. But if you have some ideas about things that we might say to one another, no matter what side of the conversation we're on, about the political situation in our country today, I really think it's incredibly important that we tone down the rhetoric and we try to be smarter about how to work on the country's agenda. We may disagree on what it is that Congress people and senators and the president should be working on. But let's disagree constructively. Let's have a dialogue where people are talking to each other and, most importantly, listening to each other. The shooting this morning was, apparently it was, I don't want to say a lot about it because I don't know what's real and what's not real news these days, but apparently it was somebody who purposely targeted Republicans. And that's sad. That's sad that anybody would be shot for trying to serve the country. I just find that appalling. And I know there's a lot of things that are happening in our world that kind of, feed on this frenzy of emotions about how upset people are about the consequences of the election. And I'm personally at the place where, I get it, and I'm not happy about everything that's going on, but I also, I'm hoping for more dialogue and less emotional hysteria around what's going on. Anyway. That's I don't want to take sides. I don't want anybody calling up and taking sides and taking shots at the other side. If you have any thoughts about what might help people calm down, I'd love to hear them. And hopefully the idea of a community radio show is that we're all in this together. And I hope that there's people out there that have got some thoughts that they want to share. If you want to call me with your thoughts about that, the number to call is 203 336 9756. 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. So that's one topic. Another topic is I had a wonderful chance to go over to a mosque for the first time. Oh, I got a call. Just a sec. Hi, this is... Oh, could you turn your radio down? Got the echo in there, so if you could turn your radio down, I can talk with you.
Yeah, it's down.
I can't really hear you, Seth, unless you turn that dial down.
Yeah, it should be down.
Now
it's down?
It is now, I think. Did you say this is Seth?
Excuse me?
Was your name Seth? I wasn't sure.
No, Seth.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's something in the background that's causing me not to be able to hear you.
All right. How about now?
That's better. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I was driving in a car. So
okay. Thank you. What was your first name? Was it Chet, did you say?
Jeff.
Jeff. Okay. Sorry about that. Thanks for the call, Jeff. What are your thoughts?
I wanted to say, and I'm a little afraid to say this out loud, but I'm really not surprised about the shooting. And it's a little bit disappointing to hear people call for the American public to start having a conversation in a rational manner and to have a dialogue and exchange ideas and accept differeces. I think it's up to our leaders to do that. They shouldn't make us responsible for doing the constructive and right thing. It's our leadership that's supposed to be doing the constructive and the right thing and having a constructive dialogue, even if they disagree. Oh,
I agree with I agree with you, Jeff.
The Americans must stop asking the poor schlep who's just trying to stay alive to always be the one to be the rational, sane, peaceful, forgiving, accepting individual when our leadership is pretty much raping us. They're not interested in having a constructive dialogue, even though they disagree, and coming up with something for the benefit of the small guy. I mean, it's just pretty much a foregone conclusion that all our representatives are well, Will Rogers said it best, America's got the best politicians money can buy.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
And all our guys are bought and paid for. They surely don't seem to give a flying anything about poor people, and they don't speak to us honestly or intelligently. They speak to us in sound bites and disgusting, trite, banal, oversimplified sound bites. And I'm not surprised that people are frustrated and angry enough, to the point of violence, because I think the American public feels like violence is being committed against them by our leadership.
Well, I think that this
is a heads up and a warning that all politicians, especially Republicans, should pay very close attention to.
Okay. Well, thanks for the call, Jeff. I appreciate it.
All right.
Bye-bye. Yeah, so there's I don't disagree with Jeff. I think there is in leadership, I think a lot of the leaders don't do what they could do. But I also think that there is some ownership, at least I believe, for all of us to try to tone down our own rhetoric with each other. But that's my take on it, and I appreciate Jeff's phone call. Thanks a lot, Jeff, for calling in. So the other topic I want to talk about is I had this chance to visit with a mosque. There was a mosque in where I live. I live up in Simsbury, and there's a mosque in Farmington, Connecticut, and they had reached out to a number of synagogues and churches, inviting members to come and to to celebrate with them the end of day the end of a day of fasting for Ramadan, and also to experience to watch them in prayer if we wanted, and to speak with them and be to have a presenter talk with us and answer our questions if we had any questions about what we wanted to know that we didn't know much about. And so my wife and I decided we would go. We accepted the invitation, and a number of people from where we belong religiously went, but a whole bunch of other people from all kinds of places went. And it was such a lovely dialogue. If you ever have the chance and you want to know something about people that are not the same as you and are different than you, and you're curious about it, and you get an invitation, this is one of the ways I think that we build dialogue, that we don't have to depend on people in high levels and high places in Congress. These are things that people can do themselves to try and build bridges and to understand differences. And the funny thing was, at dinner, when we were all sitting together, we were sitting with people that belonged to the mosque. And, the conversation was so similar to what we might have at our own religious institution. People weren't really that different. I mean, they're different in the sense that they might pray 5 times a day, and they're different in the way that they pray, perhaps. Here's a fascinating fact. I don't know if you know much about the Bible, but there's a story in the Abrahamic religions that Abraham was told by God to take his son Isaac up to the mountain and to sacrifice him. And I guess as a true believer, he was going to do that. And I've always had trouble with that story. But nevertheless, with Islam, it's not Isaac. It's Ishmael. It's Abraham's other son that was taken to the mount. And it was, again, it's just a really interesting fact that I didn't know about the difference in the religion. But the story was the same story, that God provided the ram instead. He was just kind of testing Abraham. He wasn't... He didn't really want him to do that. He just wanted to see the degree of faith that Abraham had in his God. Again, I find that a difficult story. But the point I wanted to raise was about Abraham and Isaac and Abraham and Ishmael. Just really interesting. And I also heard something really interesting that maybe many of you don't know about what the word Sharia means, because there's been lots of conversations about, in the news about Sharia law and, how that's going to be different and doesn't fit with our Constitution. And anyway, this really energized, young, intellectually gifted person who was our presenter, who was studying to be an imam, who was talking to us, told us that, do you know what Sharia means? And most people didn't. And he said, well, Sharia just means the easiest way to the closest watering place. The easiest way to the closest watering place. And so from a culture that's built around deserts, I guess, that's pretty important stuff. But anyway, there was lots of interesting facts that I just found fascinating to learn about. And also, I felt like myself becoming much more understanding and interested in the Islamic belief system and, people who believe in this religion, because I honestly just don't know that many. I mean, over the years, I've known a few people who follow the Islamic faith, but not many. And so this was a wonderful opportunity. So I encourage people to find ways to build bridges. And regarding the first topic, I guess, if you find yourself on the opposite side of the spectrum and you think it's one group more than another group that's really creating this sense of, discourse that is this driving violence in this country, I'd say, I see it on both sides, folks. Honestly, I do. And I'd like to see it toned down. I mean, I know that I wish our leaders would do more. I mean, there's, Senator Blumenthal just initiated a I guess, a lawsuit against the president. And while I get it, I know why that's somewhat important about his business interest and how that could influence. I mean, I get all that. But boy, would I love to see Senator Blumenthal working on lowering pharmaceutical costs, which is something he campaigned on, that the president also campaigned on. And I'm just thinking, folks, I wish we could find ways, and I agree with Jeff on this, that leaders start really listening to each other and talking to each other and start doing things for the people that are paying those high drug prices, which is all of us. I just wish there was more interest in both parties, stopping the name calling and just trying to work together to do things that people believe are in the interest of most of us, if not all of us. So anyway, one of the things I thought I'd talk about was trying to bridge differences and find ways to find out about people that are the stranger, that are the other, just ways that we might find ways to know more about others who are different than us. And again, to build bridges and to look for ways to build harmony in our world. So those are the two major topics I thought I'd bring up to you. But I also want to open the doors for anybody to call in who's got something on their mind that I know that there are people that listen all the time to me. And, occasionally one of you may have something that you want to address with me that is something that has nothing to do with the two topics I just mentioned, but does have something to do with the idea that there's something in your life where you're stuck, where you're uncertain, you're doubtful and concerned, and you're not really sure how to go forward. And I like to say this because sometimes it's hard. Am I really going to pick the phone up and call Chuck Wolf at WPKN to ask a question out loud over the radio where other people might hear? Well, let me tell you two reasons why that's a good idea. One is I'm an expert. I'm here to share my expertise in ways that one of the reasons I do this show is because a lot of people can't afford to pay me to come in and work with them. They just can't afford it. I'm very knowledgeable and I'm about what I do for a living, and I get paid well. The reason I'm doing the show is because I know not everybody can afford it, and so I want to make my expertise available to you. And the reason I think it's important that if you do call in and share what's going on for you is that you're not alone in this world in feeling whatever you're feeling. You're not alone in this world in feeling stuck. So many of us that are smart people, that are good critical thinkers, excellent problem solvers, get stuck when something emotional is in play. When our emotions are kind of like we're worried about escalating a situation, or we're worried about somebody feeling like somehow we're violating their space or their feelings or their thoughts by bringing something up that they didn't bring up with us, but we feel we need to talk to them about it. Or we're a leader in an organization and we know we've got to talk to someone that we like. We actually are somewhat friendly with them, but they're doing some things that are so damaging that they could actually be fired at some point. And we're reluctant to bring it up because they do a lot of other things that we really like, and we like them, and it's just really uncomfortable. Or we have somebody who's in our family that is, I love them, but it's hard to like them because of certain behaviors and actions that they engage in frequently. And we'd love to be able to talk to them about it, but we don't want to create a strain in the family. So there's things in families, in the workplace, with peers, with bosses, with people that work for you, all kinds of things that cause us to feel very emotional. And that emotion impacts our ability to think clearly and to problem solve effectively. And so having the chance to call in with somebody like me who has some expertise to help you to think that through and just be a good sounding board for you and offer you up some ideas about things that you might do, hopefully is very helpful to you as an individual, but everybody else that's listening gets the chance to see how this all works. I mean, I can give you examples and tell you things, but I mean, when I get a phone call and it really live, in a few minutes, I'm actually able to hear you talk a little bit about your situation, how you are feeling, and how anybody else that's key to your situation might be feeling. And then help you think about what would be ideal for you and for those other people to feel. and then work with you on strategies to help to create that, everybody learns. So, if you've got a conflict, if you've got something that's a problem that's unsolved at this point, if you have some situations in your life, whether it's a relationship with somebody that's outside of the workplace and in your personal life or in your community, in your neighborhood, in your, groups that you're affiliated with, if you've got an issue where it's a decision that needs to be made and either of the choices or any of the choices, none of them seem great, and you're wondering which one you might pick and why. If you got anything like that going on, give me a call, and let's see if I can help you with this emotion roadmap, and other people can learn as well. By the way, you're listening to WPKN 89.5 FM, and we are streaming live on WPKN.org. And this is Chuck Wolf, and it's the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. So let me give the number several times, and I'll wait a moment and see if anybody's got something that they'd like to chat about. By the way, what you can chat about is either a challenge that you might be facing. If you have any thoughts about how we might create more harmony in our world, in lieu of all the political kind of craziness that's going on these days. And also, if you have some ways of building bridges or other thoughtful ways that you might help to learn more about people we might consider to be different than us, that you consider different than you, and how you might have found ways to learn more about them in a constructive way, I'd love to hear from you. The number, 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. Hi, this is Chuck. You're on the air. Who's calling, please?
Hey, this is Brian.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for the call. What's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to talk about something that I found very helpful to me. By the way, this is my first time hearing this show. I think it's really interesting.
Thank you.
A lot of people are very upset about the political landscape and, the hate, and all kinds of crazy things going on. And I was talking to a friend about it, and he was expressing some frustration about just, having to hear about this day after day after day after day. And I said to him, well, nobody's in control of your life. If you don't want to hear about something, try not going on the computer. Try not being addicted to social media and refreshing your page every 5 seconds, because inundating your life with the pain and the strife of, people that aren't within your circle isn't really helping the way that you feel. And that's not an excuse to be ignorant of what's going on, but at some level, I'm a recently new father. And a lot of the stuff that's going on, while super important, doesn't affect the price of diapers. It doesn't affect the price of milk. I've got a life I've got to live. And if I'm spending hours and hours every day stressed about things that are, marginally within my control, then, I think that's not too good.
So your take on this is that it's best to try to have a much better balance in terms of thinking about spending less time looking at things that you don't influence or have much influence over. It's not being ignorant. It's like paying a little bit of attention, but focusing on the part of life that you do control, where things really matter a whole lot, and like your family as being the father.
It's so easy to be hyper-focused on everything that's going on because our lives are very deeply rooted with our cell phones, our smartphones, our social media. So it's really hard for some people to turn that off. And it's not easy for people to say, well, I'm just going to deactivate my Facebook. Or it's not that simple for a lot of people. But I think a big part of this, and this is how our administration is operating. There's a reason why Trump is up at 3 a.m. tweeting craziness, because he knows that there's people consuming it, people consuming it and loving it, and people consuming it and hating it. And it's all good for him. And a lot of people just don't understand the game that's being played with their attention and their life energy. And I think if people were to step back and try to, mitigate the stress in their life by ignoring these things, a lot of people would be a lot happier.
I think you're right about that. I think also the news, a lot of the news stations get great ratings when they're talking either anti-Trump or for Trump, depending on what station you listen to. And I think
he's the best thing that ever happened to them.
Yeah, as far as ratings go. So I think you're right. I think if we stop watching and listening, other than to get to whatever might be the first 15 minutes of what the news of the day is, I think it's important to pay attention. But I agree with you. I think focusing on the things that are truly important in your life, that are close to you, with the people that are closest to you, it's a great idea of helping people to think about, well, maybe I need to pay less attention. I know even on Facebook, originally Facebook for me was something where I could stay in touch with my nieces and nephews and my extended family and just see what was going on in everybody's lives, and it was great. And then people started to like stuff, and then I had to shut off the post. I didn't want to see some of it anymore. It just got so tiresome.
Well, and the thing with social media now, and in conjunction with the news, I would call it news entertainment, because it's really not news anymore. To some degree, I think there's this tendency for everybody feeling like they need to have a high.
Yeah, I think I'm losing you. I think I lost you. Brian, I just want to say thank you for the phone call. It was I think, a nice insight into thinking about, we're all kind of caught up and spending so much time online in media, et cetera, where we're hyper-focused on what is news entertainment. I like that. I like the notion of that. And yes, some of the tweeting, but a lot of the 24/7, all the news stations, it's like nonstop, hyperventilating, where I think maybe 15 minutes of news a night is plenty for most people. Thanks a lot for the call, Brian. Appreciate it. Anybody else? Something that you'd like to talk about? Maybe you have an issue you'd like to address. Maybe you want to talk about how to build, bridges to people that might be different in the way they think or behave or worship, whatever. Hi, this is Chuck. You're on the air. Who's calling, please?
Oh, hi. Thanks. Hold on. Can you hear me?
I can, yes. I'm sorry. Who are you?
Oh, my name is Doug McLeod.
Oh, that's okay. Hi, Doug. How are you?
Good. Thanks very much. Yeah, I just wanted one of the antidotes to, I think, a lot of the stress, particularly for the young kids who are exposed to the same onslaught that we all are, kids in school, to stress, is really just to be able to speak to others, particularly those who are not like them. And I belong, I'm one of the Sandy Hook Promise leaders, and we have a program that we run where we're invited to run. It's called Start with Hello, and encouraging educators and encouraging students to begin conversations with people. It's one of the best safety valves to let pressure off, particularly when people feel isolated. And I just wanted to say that that's a pretty low tech program, but when you look someone in the eye and say hello, how are you doing, and mean it, and leave some space there for an answer, conversations can start. Friendships can kind of kick off. You can find commonalities, and more than anything else, sometimes the differences that we have can also be energized. Opposites do attract. So, and I just would encourage anybody who who is interested in helping, particularly the kids de-stress, keep violence out of schools, to look at the Sandy Hook Promise, maybe consider becoming a Sandy Hook Promise leader in the programs that can de-escalate stress.
That's very interesting, Doug. Are you someone from Sandy Hook? Do you live in the community, or are you someone from the outside?
No, I didn't. But last I was part of the Sandy Hook Promise marathon team last year. We a group of 21, 22 of us ran the New York City Marathon to raise money for the Sandy Hook Promise, and it's that I would encourage people to just have a look at online. You know, we can all take the promise to try to prevent gun violence in our schools, and and certainly when these things erupt, there's a trail of different points at which people could have maybe interceded. Sometimes not, but many times there are. See something, say something, and very often, again, it boils down to just communicating and starting a conversation. You can use the hashtag in social media, hashtag start with hello, and advocate for that. Very low tech, but very effective.
It's interesting. Many years ago, Doug, I used to work in schools. I was my first adult job outside of college was working as a elementary school counselor, and excuse me, I was trained in I was trained in something called the Magic Circle. A fellow named Uvaldo Palomares was the author of the program, and it was fascinating. What you did at all grade levels, actually, there was a whole curriculum around it, but something that you might consider maybe adding to what you already do is we would have a group of people sitting together in a circle, and they would typically from a class, and there would be people, from, again, not necessarily people who would talk to each other normally. I mean, there might be people that were very athletic, people that were very studious, people that were special needs, people that were musicians. I mean, in terms of where their preferences or priorities might be. But what we did was we asked, okay, in this circle, everything you say is going to be safe. No one's going to make fun of it. In fact, we're actually going to repeat it before the next person talks. They're going to repeat what they just heard. And what we're going to talk about is about feelings. And for instance, I want to ask I'm going to ask the whole group to share a time when they felt angry. What caused them to feel angry, and what did they do about it? And after they finished, I'll ask somebody else to repeat what they said and then tell a time when they felt angry and what they did about it. And then after everybody's finished, I ask people, the way it works is you ask people, okay, so did we hear anything that sounded like themes? Were there certain things that sounded similar when people spoke? And all of a sudden, people are understanding that even though this special needs student might be somebody who isn't good at, arithmetic or algebra, depending on what grade level. But boy, did they have an interesting way of dealing with anger. And you know what? As an athlete, I might never have talked to this person who is really, really a brilliant musician. But, something he, she said about anger made me think that, maybe we got a connection. So anyway, you can talk about anger, you can talk about sadness, happiness, embarrassment, humiliation. I mean, all kinds of tough things to talk about. But, not forcing people to say this is what you do, but just listening to how people are dealing with these things. And it builds community, and it helps I think, with the conversations you're trying to create. So just a thought to pass along to you and your team.
No, that's great. And, one of the most popular movies, back in the 80s was The Breakfast Club, because you get a group of people who couldn't be more dissimilar, in their various, social groups, having to spend a detention with one another, and they open up and talk about their things, and again, it's these are universal themes, but again, I would encourage anybody to take a look at the Sandy Hook Promise page and encourage everybody to try to get involved. And again, it starts with hello, and they can really take things very far on their own without having to they need to work with the school and the school district, of course, to be invited into the school. But the program is all there and kind of ready for anybody who wants to work with this program.
Well, Doug, I want to thank you so much for the phone call, and more importantly, even for the work that you're doing. It sounds like a great initiative, and if the idea that I shared with you was helpful and you wanted to talk more about it, I'd be happy to at some point. If you like. I appreciate it.
Great show. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Doug, for the call. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, that was great. So I want to thank people for calling in, Jeff, Brian, and Doug. If you got a call, I've got a little bit more time this afternoon. It's 203-336-9494. 9756. 203-336-9756. So topics we've been talking about this morning have been a little bit about some of the violence that's happening around some of the political discourse in this country. Jeff's thoughts were that leaders need to take more ownership of having real discourse and paying attention to the needs of so many of us that we elect these people. And he used the famous quote from Will Rogers: "We have the best politicians money can buy." There's no perfect, there's no perfect system out there, whether it's democracy or communism or something in between. Socialism. There's all kinds of forms of government. I think ours is perhaps one of the best, if not the best. But, no form of government works well without dedicated congressmen and women, right? If you are in it for, building your wealth, building your power, if you're in it for yourself and for those close to you and not for the rest of us, to me, you're in it for the wrong reasons. And we do, I have to say, I wish this group was more active and more powerful and had more to show for it. But there's a small movement being built, and I'm a part of it, a small part of it, called No Labels. And No Labels is an organization that is dedicated to people to. The slogan is to stop fighting, start fixing. And there are Congress people who have taken a pledge that they will work across party lines, become a powerful group in and of itself to help pass legislation that both parties can agree on. They're dedicated to listening to each other. And I just want to talk about my Congresswoman, Elizabeth Esty. I don't always agree with her. I don't always think that she makes the best choice. But I always believe she's making the best choice she thinks is in the interest of her constituency and of the people of Connecticut and of the people of America. I think she's a real stateswoman. And I just hope that we have more and more people that take that approach. That if you hear somebody who's talking about the initiatives that they're taking to work across the aisle, as opposed to how bad the other guy is or the other woman is or how bad the other party is, I think you're looking at a person who wants to get things done. And I just have a really high regard for her. I encourage you to look up nolabels.org if you're interested. We're hoping to build something on the state level as well. We have our own share of difficulties, as many of you know, relative to the budget deliberations in our state. One of the things that strikes me, again, this is not a political show, but I have some political feelings right now, I guess, is the lack of an economic development plan. I have not seen the Republicans or the Democrats or the governor create any kind of strategy that says, let's look at the regulations in our state and let's look at the laws in our state and let's look at the taxes in our state and say, what can we do legislatively to encourage more business growth here, more companies coming to Connecticut instead of companies wanting to leave Connecticut? What can we do to become the states that's known for encouraging small businesses and entrepreneurship? What are the things that we can do to generate, large growth in income and revenue? Right now, the only conversations I hear is what else can we cut? And we're devastating our social services and mental health. And I just think we're really, in a very tough place. And I hope that whoever emerges as the Democratic or Republican choices for the next governor comes in with an economic idea about how to attract new businesses to the state. And I hope that all the legislators that are there, get, instead of being hyper-focused on what to cut, become hyper-focused on how to drive more growth in our state. To me, that's a huge miss. And so I'm hoping people start thinking about that. Well, again, if you have something you want to call about and talk about, the number is 203 203-336-9756. I have about 5 minutes left, and I'll stop talking and just wait for a minute to see if anybody else wants to call. 203-336-9756. Two zero three 336-9756. Now, if you're thinking about picking up the phone, I guess I'm going to ask you, pick it up right now so I really have a chance to talk to you. And make that call. 203-336-9756. Okay. So I don't think anybody's calling at this point because I only got a few minutes left. So let me just kind of go over what did we talk about today. We talked about the fact that there's some violent things happening out there in our streets, and we talked about what we might do differently, and one of the things that Jeff suggested is that the leaders need to take more ownership of that, and I agree. I also think there are things we might do, and we had Brian call in and say, he's just a new father. He's got to change diapers. He's got to buy milk. Those things aren't really being impacted by a lot of what happens in D.C. or at the state capitol in Hartford. And so, maybe it's time that we all started to be more conscious of what are we filling ourselves up with and paying more attention to spending more time at home with our loved ones, focused on relationships and the things that we need to do to make those relationships great, and less time paying attention to the news. It wasn't to ignore the news, but the real news is about 15 minutes to 20 minutes maybe a day, and the rest of it is more about editorializing and the tweets of the president, and sometimes and the 24/7 cable news, as well as the major news stations, constantly talking and editorializing about Republicans are bad, Democrats are bad, instead of, just focusing on just what the news is and then finding other ways to entertain us. But he called it news entertainment. I thought that's probably true. It's almost more about entertainment than it is about news, really, after the first 15 minutes to half hour. So maybe shutting off some of our posts, etc., and things like that. And then we talked about, the Sandy Hook promise, and Doug had a great story about how to build bridges and build differences. I mentioned my experience being invited to a neighborhood mosque in Farmington. It was a wonderful event. We were asked as a member of different religious institutions to come and observe and to see and to visit and to meet and to ask questions. And the whole affair was just lovely. And it was so nice to be able to spend time learning something about things I didn't know much about. So I talked a little bit about what I learned about Sharia, and also what I learned, that a famous Bible story, how it was a little different in the Islamic religion than it was in my own. And so all of that is just a way of learning and becoming more in tune with and aligned with people that look like they may be different than us, and certainly are different in some ways, but in so many other ways are so similar. And that's the way I think we build bridges. And I mentioned something I experienced many years ago called Magic Circle that I shared with Doug about ways that we might all learn from each other about how we might deal more effectively with things like anger, things like humiliation, things like sadness, all things that impact all of us all the time. And yet, we don't have formal learning, but if we could just find ways to share with one another and learn from one another, and again, find out that while we might look different, while we might pray different, while we might have different political beliefs, that in so many ways, when we are dealing with things that are elemental, foundational, like love, like anger, like sadness, like loss, we are so similar. And that provides some hope for me, and I hope for you. You've been listening to Chuck Wolf, the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. It's WPKN 89.5 FM, listener-supported radio. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and I'm on the first and second Wednesdays of each month. Bye-bye now.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.